Hello, and welcome to week 8 of Felicity Workshop. So let's check in once again. It's interesting times we live in, and my hope is that what's going on in the world right now will get better and better. And I just want you to take this moment. We're halfway through the semester, and I just take a moment to think about how you've changed over the last 2 years. Because of what's going on in the world, because of the pandemic. Think about how you've changed. Think about maybe some new traditions you've started. Think about how you've rethought your home, your friends, what you've rediscovered in your life. And then think about how, you probably share that with many, many, many people in the world. That experience, this is such a global experience that we've had over the last 2 years. How could that change your audience? What are some ways you can rethink your storytelling based on people like yourself that have changed and gone through this experience? We have another guest speaker next week, Sarah Boyd from Sarah Boyd Company. She will come and talk to us about brands, but she's now outside of the brands, and brands hire her as public relations for them, since they don't have public relations teams within. So a whole nother model of how you can look at this role in this sector. Remember also, I know we're only in week 8, but Assignment 2 presentation submissions are due week 10. Just a little heads up reminder. Always remember in Tell Me a Story, our goal here, whether it's recording your submission or whether it's talking to your teammates or whether it's talking to me, you want to continue to elevate your communication style, have confidence in your ideas, challenge yourself, stretch your creative abilities, and it really engage your audience. So, as I was thinking about things that have sort of crossed my path, I think about Amazon a lot. I shop from Amazon. I study Amazon. I'm fascinated by the world's connection to Amazon. And I wonder. I was in their brick and mortar bookstore for the first time about 2 years ago. And just again in a different one just about a month ago. So I wonder, why did Amazon decide to build brick and mortar bookstores? And that's my challenge for you. I think about Glossier, the beauty brand, which I respect so much, which you may know, went from a digital platform to a brick and mortar store. It's a phenomenon we really haven't seen in a big way. And we saw it a lot, the opposite, happening last century. As soon as the internet existed, many, many stores that were brick and mortar for years and years built a digital platform. It was easy, it was affordable, and they needed to be where their audience was, and their audience quickly moved to the digital platform. With Amazon, I think it's interesting. It's an example of where one person can really change a whole industry like they did with books. And this idea of building a bookstore for a customer who has told you by their actions that the process of shopping was less important than the speed in which you shopped. I think it's a very interesting study. Another interesting study, completely on the other side of the world, is this Sprite shower that took place in Rio. And I think it's quite interesting. I mean, it took place a lot of places around the world. But this idea of, how do you break through to your audience in a way that's relevant to your audience? Now, we could have a discussion on Amazon building a bookstore for all those people like myself who love the process of shopping for books in a tangible way. We can also look at something like the Sprite company, a very, very popular drink around the world, especially in areas of the world with warm locations like Rio, like Israel, like New Zealand. And you see kind of this explosion of not pushing the product on the consumer, but saying this consumer, when they drink, our drink in hot weather, it quenches their thirst, it hydrates, it's refreshing. Well, you know what else is refreshing? Is a nice cool shower when you've been in the heat for 8 hours. So really clever pop-up. This isn't a permanent installation, but it talked about the brand in a way other than we're another soft drink. So it didn't compete toe-to-toe with all the other soft drink experiences, right, that have a jingle or have a clever commercial. This is for a small group of people in a warm location to experience it firsthand and then to tell their friends. And of course, it went viral. So we talked a bit last week about psychographics confusing consumer base, and I've been talking a lot for a number of weeks about diversity and inclusion, right? Like our discussion forum. Like how we don't communicate what women want, what men want. In the 21st century, we still have, this confusion about, and this is just a binary confusion. Imagine in terms of how someone self-defines. The spectrum of gender identity is huge. So some very unexpected examples of marketing have come up, and I've loaded all of these into our Blackboard shell, but I think it's kind of interesting that when you have a very mindful brand and very clever marketers in public relations, that they look at the world, the changing face of the world, the changing face of their audience, and they say, we're going to lose them if we don't change. We're going to lose the big battle, the big war, if we don't change. They are walking away from us, right? Hallmark is a great example. Hallmark, for those of you that don't know, an American iconic brand, more than 100 years old, privately owned by the originating family, holds the sort of global market for greeting cards, right? Greeting cards, wrapping paper, party stuff. They have their stores, they have channels. It's become kind of this mega brand, but it's rooted in mid-America traditional Christian values. And so fundamentally, the world is not necessarily rooted in this kind of ethnocentric U.S. middle America, Christian values. So what's interesting is they did a series of marketing campaigns and public relation campaigns that talked to diversity. So I encourage you to go into our shell and watch this commercial, very unexpected, from Hallmark. Another that, I can't have this discussion without bringing up, again, one of my favorite campaigns of all time. I mentioned this in prior weeks, the Sunsilk campaign. So what is changing in the world, and because of that, what's changing in your audience? Again, McDonald's. We talked about McDonald's and Burger King a couple of weeks ago. McDonald's holds the #1 position in fast food. It's a global brand. It's an iconic brand. It's a family brand. Now, what they did so cleverly in this campaign is they started to empathetically go deeper into the idea that every family is not the same. And when you watch this, you'll see that it's quite unexpected from McDonald's, and it's a quite unexpected story to tell someone who, is a fan or could be a future fan of a fast food restaurant. We talked about Coke earlier, the iconic 1971 I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing campaign. Amazing. I think this brand is amazing. Coke, again, holds the #1 position, has for many, many years. Pepsi always tries to fight it, but the world is about Coke. Coke is also, with the proliferation of Coke product, as well as other products within their portfolio, have tried to address the needs of a changing society. They have water, they have juice, they've got soft drinks. It's a very, very broad. What's so interesting and so unexpected about this particular campaign that I encourage you to watch is Coke. Part of the DNA of Coke is happiness. It's one of the few brands that actually can own happiness and bring happiness. And this is really sweet and really unexpected and came out of left field and just changed the playing field for how, what the dialogue can be and how great a difference these kind of iconic brands that have infiltrated our system, how they can change the world. Then last year, this campaign came out from Nike. As some of you may know, I worked at Nike for years. Amazing brand, amazing experience. And what was interesting is part of my responsibility when I was hired at Nike in the first decade of this century was to focus on women. Because what the brand found at 35 or so years old is that the only reason women shopped their brand was to buy things for the men in their lives or the boys in their lives, right? Nike's target is a 15-year-old boy. So when you see the great, leap that the brand has done from the first decade, now entering the third decade, with this ad, it's remarkable. This would not have been an ad. This would not have been a campaign. This would not have been a storyline. This would not have been an intimate connection that the brand would have made 20 or 30 years ago. So watch this and be as moved as I was. So have you ever experienced the privileged walk? I actually added this, and I don't know if you've done it or not, but again, here's another reminder. It's in our shell. If you haven't watched this video, if you haven't experienced this, maybe you want to, you're working at a firm right now where HR is trying to figure out a way that people can work better together. You could always suggest this if they don't know it. But it helps us understand in real ways, in real language, in everyday language, how diverse we are, how similar we are, and how that discovery can be so surprising. You also remember that psychographics are confusing our consumer bases. So I want to talk a little bit about consumer motivations and how we really tap into that. And again, this is a study in empathy. So when we look at how we can connect with consumers, we look at, there's a few ways. There's a lot of ways, but here are four key ways. In-depth interviews, projective techniques, association tests, and focus groups. And each of these, depending on your audience, will allow them sort of the comfort and the confidence to speak freely about whatever topic you're talking about. So when we look at how, we can better study our audience, we can look at something called an empathy map. And this is really, a very simple structure that sort of encompasses the 360 experience of any person going through life. In the case of this particular diagram, it will often use the pronoun he, but it doesn't mean it's only for men or for people who identify as male. This is just, it could say they. It just happens to be this format. So we look at, first, what does this person think and feel? What really counts? Major preoccupations, worries, aspirations. Then we think about what this person sees, their environment, their friends, what the market offers. Then we go to the other sense of hearing. What does the person hear? What their friends say, what their boss says, and also people who influence them, whether they know them or they're online influencers. What do the influencers say? Then how does that all come together and manifest what they say or do? their attitudes in public, how they dress, how they present themselves, how they tell stories, their behavior toward others. What are some of their challenges? We call them pains as we study consumers. What are some of their challenges, fears, frustrations, obstacles, constraints? And how can our brand help them with their gains? Now, when we look at an empathy map, what we're missing here is their passions. So when we look at their pains, we also want to look at their passions, meaning it's not just things that we want to solve or bring or help them get through an obstacle as a gain. We also want to take what they love doing and see if we can even make that better, like the Sprite shower at the beaches of Rio de Janeiro. In other words, not taking away the heat, but making the experience even grander. So when I look at consumer groups, these four mindsets stand out to me. So why do you think I love these consumers so much? I love interacting with them. And by love I mean as a marketer, as a publicist, I like interacting with these groups. Why do you think I highlight these four? Because they share the same mindset. New parents, pet lovers, brides, and grandparents are four categories of people, four tribes, four communities that share a mindset of acting out of emotion and passion rather than logic. They don't think in terms of cost, they think in terms of value. They have a sense of immediacy, a sense of urgency. They think bigger than they do about purchases for themselves or activities for themselves. Very, very interesting synergy between these four groups. So they're all very different people on the surface, but with a similar mindset inside. They lead with passion. So when we look at ways we can touch our consumer, we also want to create value propositions for the jobs to be done. And as we study marketing and public relations, we look at these moments, these opportunities, as jobs to be done, right? These are the gains. So it could be symbolic. It could be functional. It could be emotional. It could be economic. It could be social. And it could be personal. So when we look at these six, now many companies might do one or two. The great brands, think of a great brand, they probably do 5 or 6. Meaning they add value in a multi-leveled way and makes their consumer's life so much richer that the consumer adopts the brand and judges all future decisions based on that brand. So when you look at the Apples of the world, you look at the Nikes of the world, you look at these mega brands, these Amazon of the world, Facebook, what are these brands that have attracted billions of people? It's because the brand is addressing so many of these jobs to be done. And these are all areas that bring value to your customer. And remember, job-defined markets are generally much larger than product category-defined markets. Why is that? Well, think about a product category. I want a better vacuum sweeper, right? It's going to be maybe an engineering job. It's going to be a design job. It's going to be a cost thing. This is on sale. That's not on sale. This engine's bigger than that engine. This is for pets. This is for babies. Much smaller than I want to give the homekeeper or the whoever responsibility is to clean the home. I want to give them more time to themselves. What would I do? So when it comes to vacuuming, how can I make that job easier for them and less involved for them so they have more time to spend for themselves? So looking at the jobs, the emotions, the psychological, right? In fact, Clayton Christensen said marketers who are stuck in the mental trap that equates market size with product categories don't understand who they are competing against from the customer's point of view. Again, empathy. Put yourself in the shoes of the customer. When you talk about value, value is not going to be a price point. It's not going to be how much money's in my wallet. It's going to be, how do I figure out not to do something else so I can buy this thing, which brings such value to my life that it makes my life better on so many levels. How can I not pay rent so I can buy the new iPhone? I'm making that up, of course. But it happens, and it happens a lot. So now, shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about websites, blogs, and podcasts. So we look at learning outcomes from this part of today's lecture, report the exponential growth of the internet, summarize the differences between traditional and new media, report some of the winning characteristics of websites, report the general guidelines for writing web content, describe the purpose and components of an online newsroom, review the utility of different types of blogs, and describe podcasts and their use. So let's start with the exponential growth of the internet and the World Wide Web. I've included in our shell this short video, and this is really about the beginning of the internet. The actual origins started in this room, in that machine in the far right corner. And so you go from something so small to what you all have grown up in, what you all experience every day, the World Wide Web. So the exponential growth of the internet and the World Wide Web, a giant network of hardware and computers versus the World Wide Web, which was really a slightly different innovation, which is about documents connecting to documents. It's more of a communication tool. So when you think about www dot, that's World Wide Web dot. It's much more specific, and it's contained within the internet. So what's the difference between the internet and the World Wide Web? The internet's a global network of networks, while the World Wide Web is the collection of information which is accessed via the internet. Very different, sometimes interchanged, but now you know the difference. The difference between traditional and news media. So the new public relations paradigm is, we look at characteristics of traditional media versus this introduction of technological innovations and the web. So what is the new public relations paradigm in the times of coronavirus? Think about that. It's not only changed the way we live, it also changes the way we do our jobs, the way we hear information, and what that information means to us. The winning characteristics of websites that help to achieve organizational goals. So planning an effective website, basically, unfortunately, everyone can have a website. Maybe a lot of you have your own websites. It's not difficult to own a website. It's really not. It's not difficult to build one. It's not difficult to own one. Thanks to technology, if you're selling a product, you can actually have someone else fulfill the sales. So you just have to work on the brand site. It's really not difficult. But if you're going to develop a website, you really want to make sure that you use some of the websites that you love as inspiration. Maybe it's the navigational tools. Maybe it's the way images are presented. Maybe it's what the landing page is like. What's happened in the 21st century, especially it's sort of the end of the last decade and now this decade, is in the past, as I had said, brick and mortar stores went online. And they would often still keep up their brick and mortar stores in the way they were. They change their window display, or they change the floor set, or they get new product, and there's a cadence to that. And that would be reflected based on the brick and mortar store in the website. And then that all shifted. So now we look at the website as the main store, the driving force of metabolism, and making sure that the brick and mortar store reflects the story we're telling. Who are some of your favorite websites and why? This is a great place to start. Think about those websites, those go-to websites for yourself, whether it's the products, whether it's the navigation, whether it's, you've never shopped from it, but it's a way of gaining an insight into another sector or industry, whatever it is. Think about why you go there. And when you're thinking about a website for your brand, when you're thinking about generating content for the website of your brand from a public relations point of view, think about what some of your favorite websites do. So managing the website, it's the department's responsibility. Most of the responsibility, not so much for the hardwire or the design, but kind of making sure that there's content. It often lands on communications and PR. Now, again, that's partnering with IT, partnering with marketing, partnering with human resources. But the idea of making sure that the dialogue is there, the cadence of the dialogue, often lands on marketing and communications. Making the site interactive, there's a push and a pull in our economy system. Push is more what happened to your grandparents and perhaps your parents. It's a 20th century idea, which is, I'm a car company, and I'm going to make new cars. They come out in August. You can't see them until July, and you can't own one until October. That's the way we work. That's the cadence of the automobile industry, and it's always been like this for 100 years. Versus the 21st century, which is pull, which is I'm the consumer, and I've got power here. Not just power not to buy, but I want to tell you that I don't want the car in August. I want it in June. I don't want to wait till October. I want it in August. Whatever it is, we start to make demands. We start to demand different shapes, colors, styles, price points. I don't want to pay that much. You're not bringing enough value. You're not solving enough of those jobs. You're not making my life better on so many layers where I'm going to pay that price. It's not warranted. And again, using Nike as the example, you have an incredible phenomena that's happened over the last 30 years. The sneakerologist or the sneakerhead. Basically, what that is men and women who spend thousands and thousands of dollars per pair, never wear them, and store them in the boxes. Because the brand has such equity and such value that each pair, they believe, will be worth 10 times as much in the future as styles and colors change throughout the decades. And in fact, Christie's auction house here in New York recently auctioned off a few pair of Nike for 5 figures, for tens of thousands of dollars each. So, that's the pull mentality. That says, this is the value I believe I have for your brand, and I'm a partner here, right? So it becomes a two-way dialogue. When you think about that two-way dialogue, as a publicist, you want to start engaging the audience as much as you can. That's your first point of collaboration. That's the partner that you want on your side. Attracting visitors to your site, there's 1,000 ways of blasts and directions and hyperlinks and search engines and again, when we talk about the consumer and the bombardment of information on the consumer, nowhere is it as evident as when you're online and the ads and everyone wanting a piece of you start to populate with pop-ups and notifications. Tracking site visitors, it's very similar to a brick and mortar store. In a brick and mortar store, you look at your traffic, how many people came into your store versus how many people actually bought something. And then by looking at those two figures, you can start to think about the profitability of your store, of the and how you could change maybe some of the profitability or some of the consumer behavior by physically altering the store in addition to altering the product. Tracking websites is the same. We can track how many times people go to your website, how many times people click in your website, how many unique visitors there are versus repeat visitors. It's all there for us. Different types of blogs, again, super important. There's my friend, Mr. Starr. Organizational blogs, employee blogs, third-party blogs. Again, we're humans. We have this need for commentary, for feedback, for sort of a more humane way of relaying information, important information. Now, again, with employee blogs or organizational blogs, you just have to be careful because it's not necessarily a secure platform. It's a conversational, almost like a town hall platform. It's not necessarily secure, so you have to be really careful what's written. You have to be careful what's discussed. People become so comfortable as if they're in a meeting, in a face-to-face meeting. They might drop a piece of information that gets out into the public realm. You just have to be really, really careful. Podcasts and their uses. Again, super popular. Number one global podcast is The Daily. Some of you probably listen to it. Basically, it's radio on steroids. It offers consumer tips, conducts interviews, shares public opinions. It enhances a brand by giving other kinds of advice or other information through the lens of the brand. It can also be a platform to communicate with employees if you have a vast global employee network. It's actually quite interesting that we want to continue to find ways to connect beyond the written word. So it's very easy. You don't need to be a rock star to do a podcast. Basic equipment, computers. It's informational. It's conversational. Once you are comfortable with your narrative and the message you want to give, your stories will be through the lens of your brand. So your audience will start to be attracted to that, and it's your job as a brand now to stay consistent with your messaging and to stay clear with your message. So I wonder if any of you have ever made a podcast. If you haven't, maybe this is your time. Try it out. Try a podcast. Try a podcast format, perhaps for one of the assignments. Maybe try a podcast. If you already do a podcast, send us the link so we can actually go and experience what you have to say. Again, any questions on today, check with your teammates first, and if not, check with me, and have a wonderful week. Take care, guys.